Y para que todos sepan, Bryant para muy bien. Súper bien. Profesional.
No, 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 no.
Hola y bienvenidos a mi canal Spanish Blueprints. Me llamo Josue. My name is Joshua. This is Spanish Blueprints. And today I have the great opportunity to speak with
Bryant.
And today Brian's going to be sharing with us his language learning journey. So, por favor, can you just start with a little bit about yourself, where you are from, and what is your native language?
All right, appreciate it, Joshua. My name is Bryant, like I said. I'm from California, born and raised. I grew up there, born in a city called Pomona, which is maybe about 30 minutes away from LA. And my primary language is English. And started learning Spanish in high school. So, took classes all the way up to Spanish AP. But I went to AP, but, I was pretty much messing around. I wasn't really studying as much as I should. So, after the first semester, I stopped and then started taking classes again in college. And then that's when I started to realize, I'm like, okay, let me take extra effort and start, learning more and more. So that pretty much is the beginning of my language process.
Okay. So you didn't grow up in your home speaking Spanish or any other languages besides English?
No, not at all. My parents are Nigerian, actually. So
Okay.
In the household, I would hear my parents speak a language called Isoko, which is like, as far as the Nigerian tribe, that's one of the very small tribes. Like there's Igbo, there's Yoruba, there's Hausa. And so pretty much like as far as listening goes, that's where I started at least listening to another language growing up my whole life.
Okay.
They didn't teach me though. That
they
was
didn't teach
the
you?
weird thing. They didn't teach me Isoko. No, so basic conversation I could understand, but yeah, for some reason they never taught us. Like me, my brother, and my sister.
And then since then, have you ever tried to learn it on your own?
One day, I'm gonna plan to because I've lived abroad. So one day I plan to at least live in Nigeria and actually learn it while I'm there. Because even if I try to learn it here, I just feel like there's not too much point because I won't really have time to practice. Like more so because I stopped, in college, but during college, I studied abroad in Spain for about only one semester, and so I've had growing up in California, you definitely hear Mexican Spanish. So to actually hear things when I'm in California, I can understand the accent. But once I moved to Spain for that semester, the accent was totally different. You would hear words like, instead of fiesta, it's fiesta. And they would chop the words off of, let's say the usted form in every word. Instead of tienes, it's so tiene. So I would be confused with that. I'd say my first 2 months in Spain was pretty difficult. I'm not going to lie. It was pretty difficult. I was living with a Spanish family, and that's when I started to see improvements by month 3. But I would say by, month 5 is when I headed back to California. So tried to keep up, with vocabulary, but yeah, my discipline wasn't there. So just kind of fell off for a little while.
Okay. And how were you mostly learning Spanish when you were in Spain, would you say?
So I would take classes for the program. So the listening was there. It was a history class about southern Spain for the most part. And then there was an actual language course that I did. And I would see improvements in my listening, definitely. And then speaking, and listening, talking to the Spanish family, my Spanish host brother, that definitely helped. And then meeting Spaniards as well, just, through my journey out there. definitely helped. So there were days where I felt really good about my Spanish. Like there's days where I felt like, man, I got this. If I spent a little bit more time, oh yeah, I got this. But then I talked to the next person, let's say the next day, and then it would just, throw my confidence just off to where I feel like, man, I'm not where I want to be at all. So I felt like I was at the point where it just depended on who I talked to, and it would I can understand better. It would give me confidence to, butcher my way through the sentences. But yeah, I'd say by the time I left, I felt like I was at the intermediate level.
Intermediate, okay. And how would you describe that exactly? Like, what does intermediate level mean to you?
I would say being able to construct sentences on the fly, even if it's not perfect in the grammatical sense, it's enough where the other person understands you. And, if the person really liked you, they would actually tell you how to, construct it. Instead of saying this, you say this. Instead of saying por, you say para for, depending on how you construct the sentence or depending on the context. And I would say definitely when it comes to listening, I would say maybe you're not understanding everything, but you understand the gist of it.
That's interesting. For me, that sounds very advanced already.
I feel there's days like, let's say right now, since this is going to be my first time tested a little bit in a while, I start off choppy and then during the conversation it gets better. So sometimes I don't know where I'm at. There's days I feel like, man, I'm back at the beginner level. Then there's other days where I feel like I'm intermediate again. But advanced, I would say my reading is probably in the advanced level. But my speaking is probably, I would say, intermediate at best.
Okay, that's really interesting. Yeah, I would say the same thing. I'm definitely like some days I feel very very fluent. Other days I don't feel fluent, or some days I make a lot of mistakes, and other days I don't. Like it doesn't make any sense, like why that happens. But I definitely feel that pain. It's just like, oh, like how come I can't express myself some days? Other days I'm like really vibrant. I feel like I can speak to whoever. But
yeah,
it's kind of strange how that happens.
I kind of see it like sometimes when you're in the gym, there's days when, you're going really hard, and then it can be 2 or 3 days later and you can't do the exact same thing as far as the max amount of reps or that weight. You can't do as much. So sometimes I feel like just learning is like, at least keeping consistent, which I haven't been. That's something I try to keep doing, even though I'm in school right now for cybersecurity. But I try to at least get 30 minutes a day. But it's helped. It's definitely helped. And I'd say the best way for me that's been helping is listening to songs in Spanish, but also having the lyrics, in English and Spanish. I forgot the name of the website, but there's a website where it's pretty much in English and Spanish at the same time, just side by side.
Does that ever confuse you? Because for me, I don't know, I've always just looked at like songs or Spanish songs with the Spanish lyrics. I've never really tried to translate them to English. I feel like for me it's a little bit difficult to compare the two. You know what I mean? Like the meaning sometimes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, you're right about that. I think just overall, just because there's sometimes I think with me there's words in Spanish where I feel like I translate it to something else. So let's say words like I que, I think that translates into like one must or one should. But like when I hear that, I think of like, hey, that, or they're that, and I'm like, wait, how does that make sense? So in those sense, that's why I have to translate it. So I remember that, there's specific rules in Spanish, even though this may translate this way, this is not what it means. So, it helps. It definitely helps me in that sense. But Yeah, no, definitely. I forgot the name of the website, but it's good. It's definitely helped.
I'm really curious to know as well. Did you develop a Spanish accent while you were in Spain?
No, no. So, like, I would say no one really mentioned what my because I feel like my Spanish is a little bit of everything. Sometimes like the words that I'm using is Mexican Spanish, but then it's not understood in Spain at times. So there were times in Spain where people were not understanding me because of the vocabulary I'm using. So really, when I started teaching English, I taught English in a few different countries. I taught in Colombia, and I taught in China, and I taught in Korea. So when I got to Colombia, Colombians definitely let you know, just like, how's your Spanish? So a lot of times they'd say I sound like a gringo. So there's times when it got better, because I was there for about 7 months. So there was times I was feeling real good about my Spanish, and like they knew I didn't have the Colombian accent. But I just remember this woman asking me, she was all like, "Eres un puertorriqueño?" I'm like, no, soy de California. And then she's like, "Oh, okay, tu español es muy bien," so I felt good. Then there's other times when I'm speaking to like a close friend of mine who's Colombian, and they'll say, "Oh, you sound like a gringo." So it definitely fluctuated at times. But like when she asked if I was Puerto Rican, I was like, okay, my Spanish it's not bad today. All right.
So you think you like really improved your Spanish when you were in Colombia?
Oh yeah, definitely. I felt like Colombia, I regret not staying out there as long, but I felt like, I wasn't making that much money out there. The money was kind of low for a teacher in general. So, but I definitely improved because Colombian Spanish wasn't as fast as Spain Spanish, in my opinion, but it was definitely still fast enough to where I had to keep up. So there was days where if I'm speaking to someone who, let's say who's educated, I can understand them. But someone who had like a rough accent and I guess you can say not as educated, didn't like go to high school or didn't go to university, it was hard to understand them at times. But for the most part, I could understand Spanish out there.
Okay. And were you, okay, so yeah, it's really interesting because I haven't met anybody who has taught English like in a Spanish-speaking country before. So during your classes, were you speaking Spanish to them? Like, were you speaking Spanish only and teaching them English? Or was it, like just all in English in your classes?
So, they told me not to speak any Spanish at all.
Oh, wow.
So, but that stopped after about 3 weeks. Because, because they knew, like, I was living in Cali, Colombia, where there's a lot of black folks out there. So immediately when they saw me and they heard me speak English, they were like, "Oh, you don't know any Spanish?" I'm like, "Oh, no, I don't, So they would be motivated to try to speak English to me. And that was a cool thing. So I did my best without speaking Spanish, but there were days that they caught me, saying something in Spanish to like one of my Spanish co-teachers. So they would be like, "Oh, Teacher Bryant, he speaks Spanish." I'm like, no. Then it got to the point, I'm like, okay, más o menos, So, but once I started, speaking Spanish outside of class to them, that's when I connected with like pretty much all the students. So there's times where we're speaking Spanish at lunchtime, just playing dominoes, or I'm playing soccer with them outside. But yeah, I'd say it was good for me to start speaking Spanish to them because it was like an olive branch. It was a connection between us because once I only kept speaking English, it kind of put up a wall because only few students were really good at English at that point.
Okay. And was that what age were you teaching?
They had me teaching multiple classes, so it ranged from, I would say, 10 years old to about 16, 17.
Okay.
So, like, on Mondays, it would be, let's say, the 7th and 8th graders. Tuesdays, it would be the 6th graders. Wednesday, Thursday, Friday to be the high school students.
And did you find that there was a difference in their levels, or like their ability to learn English based off their age?
Not necessarily. I'd say it was kind of the same in all the classes. There would be the motivated students, and that would be like the students in the front. But I'd say the interest, I would say the interest and motivation were more so with the younger kids. But with the older kids, I think they kind of were set in their ways a little bit. So I would say there was more motivated students that were younger, as opposed to, like, let's say the high school students that were, especially the ones that getting ready to graduate. Yeah, so it was a good experience. I definitely liked it.
And was this just like a school specifically that only taught English, or was it like a regular Colombian school that taught like everything?
Yeah, it was a regular Colombian school. So the program, I think it was called Ministry of Education, and they had schools all over. But the school that I was particularly at I think it was on the north side of Cali, and I was the only teacher in that entire school as far as English teachers. There were, like, my co-teacher was definitely, an English teacher as well. She is a native Colombian. But as far as, like, an ESL teacher, I was the only one in there. So, they had us going to different classes, different periods, trying to get everybody, but me only being one person and us being two people, we couldn't get everybody throughout the day. So it just depends on throughout the week.
And outside of your classes, were you like actively studying? So, like, in comparison, to Spain, were you studying Spanish every single day? Was it just full immersion? Like studying, like, at home, that kind of thing?
Yeah. Me and a good friend that I met out there were studying Spanish almost every day.
Wow.
We would try to do, like, let's say 10 words a day, and start studying, like, past tense, present tense, conditional, future tense. So we would study every day. So from where we started, I felt like when I first got to Spain was pretty much the same as my first day in Colombia. Maybe a little more. No, I take that back. My first day in Spain, I felt like I didn't know jack. It was almost like, man, after all this studying, I can barely hold a conversation. But my first week in Colombia definitely was a lot better. My speaking skills weren't there yet because I hadn't practiced in about 2 or 3 years. But my listening was really good, because I would meet people who could understand me, and when they were talking about me, I could understand what they were saying. So by the time I left Colombia, there was a major improvement. Yeah.
And which accent do you think was more difficult to understand? The Spanish accent or the Colombian accent?
A Spanish accent, for sure.
Really?
For me, definitely the Spanish accent. There's some people that say that, it's easier to understand, but for me, I just felt like I was confused because I've never heard of the list before until I was there. I would say the hardest accent for me to understand was a Venezuelan accent. No, a Chilean accent, actually. Because I went to a church. I met this, I don't know how we met, but I met this woman, she was an older woman, and she introduced me to her kids, and, they took a liking towards me, and they invited me to church one day. And I was like, well, I'll see where it's at. And they took me to another city. And when we went to that city, the preacher, the pastor was a Venezuelan guy. No, I'm sorry. He was a Chilean guy. And I couldn't understand anything. I just remember, like, I just lost so much confidence in my Spanish. And then, my friend, she told me, she said, don't even worry about it. You know, it's hard to understand a lot of Chileans, even for Colombians. So I was like, okay, all right. I don't feel too bad, but I just remember sitting there not knowing anything he said.
Okay, that's interesting. I've been hearing that a lot, that Chilean Spanish is difficult to understand, but I haven't heard them yet, so I don't know. Like, from my own experience. I've definitely heard that a lot from many people. So I don't know why it's so different in comparison to other accents, other dialects.
Yeah, based on that experience, I definitely agree. Definitely.
Okay.
For me, I would say the easiest, and maybe because I grew up in SoCal and living in Texas, I would say Mexican Spanish is the easiest for me to understand. It just sounds more fluid, smoother. But yeah, like Colombian Spanish, I would put it in the middle, not too difficult, but not the easiest to understand.
Yeah. Do they cut off a lot of their words there in Colombia?
No. I would say something that they do that I found interesting is that I think it's called like infinitives. So for like, let's say dame un minuto would be like give me a minute. It's dame un momentico or dame un minutico.
Okay,
they put a ito, tico, a lot after everything. So that was interesting to see. Like, and then my students were saying that they put that on everything. At least the Caleños, the people in Cali, would do that. I'm not sure about like people in Medellin or people on the coast, but in Cali for sure, they definitely put a tico, a tica after everything.
That's funny, because I've definitely heard that in a few telenovelas that I've watched before. I was like, oh, that's different. Mm-hmm. Hearing that tico, momentico, I was like, oh, that's really different.
Yeah. Or sometimes they do cut off instead of para, they would just say pa. Like,
Sepa, okay.
Voy pa Cali instead of yo voy para Cali, something like that. They would cut off para for sure.
And would you say you have learned Spanish by learning about the culture of the country, of a Spanish-speaking country?
In a sense, yeah. Because it gets you more interested in learning the language. So I feel like with any language, you have to learn more about the culture because you get more of a motivation to understand why people will speak this way or why people say this. It just gives you more of a sense of an understanding when you learn about the culture.
Yep, I'd agree with you. And which country do you like more? Do you like Spain more or do you like Colombia more? If you can decide.
Let's see. Food, cost of living wise, I'd definitely say Colombia. I do like some Spanish food, but I would just say Colombia had a little bit or a lot more flavor towards it.
More flavor, okay.
Yeah, like Spain's food is definitely more on the plain side. I'd say cost of living, yeah, definitely Colombia. The energy, the people, Colombia for sure. Or they're more warm.
More warm.
Yeah, definitely more warm. The vibe is just a lot. A lot. I won't say better, but I enjoyed it more. That's where I first started learning salsa. Just going to different discotecas out there and seeing people. Everyone's dancing salsa in Cali, so that was motivating for me to start learning out there. When I was in Spain, it was more so, there was a traditional dance called flamenco. So I would go to let's say a spot where I see people dancing flamenco, and that was cool, but I didn't really care to learn that. But yeah, like I would say overall, like I would love to live in Spain again. Don't get me wrong, but I would personally choose to live in Colombia. If I had the two choices to go again between the two, I'd go to Colombia.
And have you traveled to any other Spanish-speaking countries?
No, I haven't. I would love to live in Mexico at some point, or Costa Rica, maybe even Peru. But I haven't had the chance because literally probably right after right after Colombia, I moved to China.
That's really interesting. So they've been all over. So do you think teaching English has helped you to learn Spanish? And what I mean by that is like to create your own plan, to teach yourself Spanish. Has it helped you at all in that kind of way?
I think it was, in a sense, for me, not necessarily. What really motivated me to start learning more was just to meet other Americans out there that were really good at Spanish. Because there were people in the same that were teachers as well that were there for about a year, and they said they started out with minimal Spanish, but when I heard them speak, they were damn near fluent. So that's what motivated me, because there were times when they're speaking and I felt like I was left out of the conversation because I can't keep up, and then when the moment's on me to speak, I'm butchering my way through it. So those are the days that really motivated me to start learning more. So I would study, for about an hour a day, pretty much watch anything in Spanish. At the time, I was watching like Dragon Ball Z in Spanish just because it was on TV. It was funny hearing, the different characters. I don't know if have you seen Dragon Ball Z?
I have. I've not watched it in Spanish, so I'll be interested to know how the accent sounds.
It's pretty hilarious, man, to hear like Piccolo speaking Spanish with a Colombian accent. It's hilarious, man.
Oh, that's good.
So yeah, I would say definitely it was being able to be understood would be motivating, and so you can start documenting your improvements. But yes, initially it was just meeting Americans out there that were really good at Spanish.
And did you develop a Colombian accent? I can't remember if I asked you that already while you were there.
I mean, I can try it, but I think overall I'd say my whole experience, even now, well, short answer, I'll say no. But I would say when I'm speaking, I'm worrying about getting the right words out to where I'm not even thinking about an accent. But based on what my Colombian friends would tell me, even what my American friends would tell me, they would just say, "You sound like a gringo."
Gringo.
Okay. So like I would say now, like I don't know if I do have an accent when I'm speaking Spanish. There's times when if I'm consciously thinking about it, that's when some people would say, "Oh, you kind of sound like you're from Puerto Rico." I'm like, I don't know how I got that, because I don't know anything about Puerto Rican Spanish.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I've gotten some interesting questions like that as well. I mean, I think primarily I've gotten Puerto Rican, I've gotten Dominican, probably because I speak more like a Dominican. Even Cuban. Once I was like Jamaica, I was like, no, definitely not from Jamaica. So I was kind of surprised by that one. I'm like, nah.
So did you live in DR?
No, I didn't live there. I've been there twice though, so I kind of developed the accent a little bit. I mean, it's not like really strong or anything like that. But if someone were like to hear me and I'm kind of using it, they'll know like, oh, that's a Dominican accent. Because the Dominican accent is distinct, just like any other Spanish speaking countries. Like if you speak with a little bit with the lisp or whatnot, it's like, okay, that's a Spanish accent, just because they're so distinct.
Right, that's true. So, how did you start learning Spanish? Did you start learning in high school, or did you live somewhere abroad?
Yeah, so similar to your experience, I started in middle school, and then took it in high school. Then I stopped for a while until I got to college, and then I took it in college. And then after that, I just got more interested in learning about it. I didn't want to lose what I was studying in college, and yeah, since then I've just been kind of studying on my own. I've never lived abroad. I would like to, but I have not done that yet.
I hear you. I think that's what motivated me to start, because once I felt like I was burnt out with teaching. So one of the jobs that I learned that, could help you travel was IT. So that's when I started getting into IT, because pretty much, for different, let's say the Department of State or Department of Defense, they have bases in different countries and they need IT people. So I figured, this would be a good chance for me to at least go back to a Spanish speaking country because I think my issue was not focusing on one language at a time, because right after I left Colombia, I got to China, then I'm like, well, I need to start learning Mandarin. And since my Spanish wasn't where it needed to be, which is being fluent, I felt like I wasn't satisfied. So I'm learning Chinese, and when I'm speaking Chinese, Spanish words would come out at times when I'm trying to get things. And that even happens now when I'm trying to speak Spanish, and all out of the blue, a Chinese word comes out. I'm like, is it because I'm not fluent in either of them, or is that's just how it happens when someone is learning multiple languages? But I'm switching it up now. So like I kind of left. I'm not gonna pick up Mandarin again until like I feel like I'm fluent in Spanish.
So when you were in China, it was just straight Mandarin for the most part, or was it a little bit of Spanish that you were studying as well?
Yeah, it was. I was trying to do both because I didn't want to lose it. So I would go to Spanish corners. I think they'll call it like El Rincón de Español. I would meet people who were from, all over South America or Spain, or people from Russia, just anybody trying to learn Spanish. And there's also people that were fluent. So I would have when I got to Shenzhen, China, right next to Hong Kong, I had a Spanish teacher as well as a Mandarin teacher. So it got to a point where I felt like I was maintaining my Spanish while I was improving my Mandarin. And then kind of fell off for a while with the Spanish, but then I started just going to the Spanish corners, and then helped me maintain it. And then I took a break with Mandarin and Spanish. It got to a point because Mandarin is a whole nother beast.
Yeah, I bet.
It just like, I would feel like there were days where it would go up and down with me being understood. So there were times when I'm saying everything right, but if the tones aren't understood, if you're saying the wrong tones, it could be a completely different word, completely different meaning. So people weren't understanding me. So there were days where I just kind of fall back and not learn for a while, just because I lost confidence after that day. And then after a month, I'd get back to it. But yeah, I would say with Spanish, I would, try to go once a week to a Spanish corner and just to speak and stay comfortable speaking.
Okay. And just to be clear, so this Spanish corner, El Rincón, this was in China, right? How did you find it?
Yeah, this was in China.
How did you find that?
Dang, how did I find it? I think it was on, okay, so they got, there's this app called WeChat out there. And basically, I would say, think of think of Instagram, think of Twitter, think of your Apple Pay, TikTok, all in one. So it's an all-encompassing app where you can pay with it. You can transfer money from your account to your wallet on WeChat. You can look at people's pictures. You can look at people's reels, and instant message as well. So I think it was through my Spanish teacher, it must have been my Spanish teacher. She told me about it. She added me to the group. So there was I would say up to 200 people in that group. And then they would say on Thursdays, we'd come here and we just eat at let's say a Mexican restaurant somewhere in China. And then we just all, we just all have a few drinks, eat tacos, and just converse. So we would do that every Thursdays in Shenzhen. So I would do that, and then I moved to Shanghai, and then there was pretty much a different group, but it was the same thing too. Wow,
I never imagined that you could find a Spanish group like that in China. That's pretty cool.
Man, yeah, it was a good experience. I definitely that definitely helped me maintain my Spanish while I was out there, because I felt like the more I learned about Mandarin, the more my Spanish is decreasing. So I just felt, even though that may not be true, but since I'm not practicing, you use it or you lose it at that point. So I felt like I had to do something.
What level would you say that you reach with Mandarin while you were there?
I would just say elementary. There's 6 levels. There's HS, like based on the foreigners. There's HSK1 all the way to HSK6, and
Okay.
I was at HSK2. Didn't take the test for HSK3 yet, but I was getting there. So once you're at the 3, that's when you're at the intermediate level. But I was still at like 2.5 ish. But definitely enough to understand what was going on around me.
Oh, that's good. Okay. Wow. I'm so like just blown away trying to separate Mandarin and Spanish. That sounds very difficult. Like mixing those two languages together.
It's crazy how the brain works, because when you're trying to find a word in, let's say, in Mandarin, and all of a sudden it comes out in Spanish, you're like, wait, what had just happened? So that was interesting to just see how, you're trying to compensate for the lack of vocabulary you have in something, and it's like you don't want to say it in English, but all of a sudden it comes out in Spanish, and vice versa. Sometimes it happens for me with Spanish too, but not as much since I haven't been practicing my Mandarin. So I still I would say now, I'm still practicing my Spanish though.
Okay. To add on to that, I know right now I'm learning French and Spanish at the same time, and sometimes when I say a French word, I say it with like a Spanish accent, and vice versa. It's really weird. I don't know how it happens. So I'm wondering, has that happened to you? Like, I know you said you you thought of it's like a Spanish word, but you thought of the Mandarin word. But have you said a Spanish word with the Mandarin accent before?
Not that I can recall. I probably have, most likely, but not that I can recall at the moment.
Okay.
Oh, I was just saying the tones in Mandarin you would have to work so hard to say something in Mandarin, like in my opinion, to where even if I said it with a Spanish accent, as long as the tones are right, they would understand you.
So would you say that learning Mandarin was a lot harder than learning Spanish?
I would say yeah, definitely. I was, because the characters, that's a whole nother animal as well. So it got to a point where I could read some, but it's just overall the speaking, I would say in the elementary sense, it's easy to say, but then with Spanish, sometimes you kind of have to think, I don't know, like as far as backwards, instead of saying like the red dress, you would say like, you would have to think kind of backwards, flip the words like, okay, vestida rojo, But I would say if I had to choose, Mandarin is a lot harder for sure, because you just have to get yourself in that mindset that, okay, you can't think English at all. At least with Spanish, you can kind of translate it to English to where you're like, okay, these are same spelling, almost the same word in English. With Mandarin, sometimes you just have to, like, let's say for instance, the word like to start a car. You can't really translate that. The way they say it in Mandarin is almost like basically saying you're opening the car.
Okay.
So it's kind of weird. So when I would hear like my students say, "Oh yeah, open the TV, like open the movie," I'm like, "What do you mean open the movie?" But once I started learning, I'm like, "Oh, because they're translating English directly into Mandarin." So sometimes it won't make sense if you try to just do the direct translations. So Now that I think about it, definitely Mandarin is harder.
Have you been learning any other languages besides Spanish and Mandarin?
So I'm ashamed to say this. When I was in Korea, I did not really attempt to learn. I definitely learned how to. I forgot the Korean letters. I can read it out it's easier because it's not characters like in a Mandarin. But as far as learning the language, I never took a class. I was kind of burnt out from Mandarin because I had moved after about a few years, 3 years in China. I moved to Korea, just kind of, spur of the moment, So I moved within a month after my teaching contract was over. So I just felt burnt out. So I didn't learn too much, but that's been my biggest regret after I left, is not learning enough Korean. So I feel like I'm just going to do it in phases. So once I get fluent in Spanish, I'm going to go back to Mandarin and then go back to Korean. And then, after those are done, I do want to learn Japanese. So those are so I still got those life goals of mine for sure. Work in progress. So I'm still, I feel confident where my Spanish is, that, if I really stay consistent, it should be within a year. But I would just have to actually practice my speaking skills. So I would say once my school classes, once it dies down, I'm gonna start doing more classes again.
More classes. And what kind of Spanish classes would you take?
So there's this app called ITALKI, or it could be eTalki, like I talk, then I.
Yeah.
Before I was doing it consistently with a Colombian teacher, and that's when I really started picking up again. But once school started, just becoming more strenuous, I fell back a little bit. So, doing that, definitely. In the sense, I don't think I need to do the traditional classes anymore, but more so just really practice with native speaker.
And you said one of your goals is to become fluent in Spanish, or speak Spanish fluently. So what does that look like to you?
I would say overall being able to easily express your feelings, or if you can't find the right word, you can express it in a different way. So, and also just, I would say maybe understanding at least about 80% of what somebody else is saying. Whether if it's a song, whether you're in a different country that's, that you're not particularly practiced with. Like, let's say if I know Mexican Spanish, but if I go to Puerto Rico and I can understand 80% of what they're saying, I would feel like I'm fluent in that sense. So I would say, overall, just being comfortable with reading, writing, and speaking, and listening, definitely.
Yeah, I always like to ask that question because, I feel like a lot of people, a lot of language learners, we kind of have our own definitions of fluency, Like, there's not just one definition. Mm-hmm. So it's always interesting to get another perspective on that.
Yeah, so overall, like, if you can definitely understand and you are able to be understood, you're fluent in that sense. There's going to be stuff that, just based on the culture, just based on the slang, you're not going to understand if you're not hip to it. The words, the slang in Colombia is totally different than the slang in Spain. So, like, there may be things that you hear, like, let's say in Spain, like, I remember I would just always hear people say tío, like, and, the direct translation for tío is uncle. Yep. So I'm like, wait, why is everybody their uncle? Like, what's going on? But it's but like that's just saying like bro, like men. But in Colombia, I would always hear people say parce or parcero, so those things you're just not going to understand right off the bat. So if you can just get the more than a general, I'd say if you feel like you're above average with your Spanish, that's pretty much fluent in my book.
Okay. And do you focus heavily on grammar when you are learning a language?
I start off with the elementary grammar, like present, past tense, like particularly Spanish, present, past tense, just how the grammar is structured in the elementary form. But then I start, how to construct the verbs, and also I definitely focus on the vocabulary a lot more, just because for me, if there's one word that I don't understand in the sentence, I focus on that word and then I lose track of hearing everything else. So I think more so definitely vocabulary.
Vocabulary, okay. And if you could learn Spanish, let's say from scratch, how would you do that?
I would say if I can go back, I would definitely stay consistent. The consistency for sure. I would, definitely go back to high school for sure and study more and ask questions when I was confused. So that's something I didn't do enough on. If I get lost, I just kind of let it go and forget about it. But the teacher's there, so definitely ask more questions, study more vocabulary, but then definitely focus on just the elementary grammar to where, okay, as long as I can get this and master it, then I can move to the next step. I felt like I would, get some of the grammar down, then I would move to something else. So I wouldn't have mastered, A until I went to B. So now it's like I'm bad at both now, at A and B. So for me, definitely I felt like, at least just master one thing first before you move to the next.
What is your preferred method or methods for learning vocabulary in a new language?
I would say in categories.
Categories?
So,
that's good.
Yeah, like let's say for instance, you definitely want to focus on just one thing at a time, because let's say if you're just doing random words, at times you really can't put things together, but if you're focusing on the category, you can kind of play with it at least. So if you focus on household items, if you focus on something you're interested in, that at least you'll get that out of the way. So just kind of sectioning off things for sure.
Y ahora mismo vamos a cambiar de inglés al español por un ratico. Entonces, Bryant, ¿qué es lo que te gusta sobre viviendo en Texas?
A mí me gusta en Texas las comidas. Hay muchas diferentes tipos de restaurantes en San Antonio. Las comidas chinas, las comidas coreana, japonesa, y también a mí me gusta la cultura mexicana. Bailamos salsa, cada semana. Es una gran oportunidad a aprender a bailar bachata, salsa, cumbia y practicar español también. Yo también me gusta los precios. Los precios. Sí, los precios en California es muy alta. Muy alto. Sí, so, I guess es esto.
Okay. Sí, yo estoy de acuerdo con mucho que habías contado, especialmente con la comida, porque antes de mudarme aquí a San Antonio, casi nunca fui a comer en taquerías y restaurantes latinos, casi nunca. Entonces, me fascina la comida mexicana muchísimo. Los tacos de aquí son ricos.
Sí, estoy de acuerdo. Tex-Mex está bien, es okay, está bien. Pero los comidas mexicanos, origen, es muy sabrosa.
Eso es. Sí, siempre estoy buscando comida auténtica, sí. Auténtica y,
sí.
y no Tex-Mex. Pero no real.
Sí. Estoy de acuerdo.
Y para que todos sepan, Bryant baila muy bien. Súper bien. Profesional.
No. El profesional es Joshua. Yo sé los básicos. Yo voy a la clase de salsa a veces, pero he visto Joshua en la discoteca. El verdad profesional es tú.
Gracias.
El verdad profesional es tú.
¿Y cuáles son los bailes que más te gustan? Como merengue, salsa, bachata.
Bachata. Yo creo que bachata es más suave que salsa, pero a mí me gusta salsa mucho también. Me encanta bailar merengue porque la música es muy chévere, es muy bacano. Cumbia, no sé bailar, no sé
¿no
cómo
sabes?
bailar cumbia, solamente los básicos,
Los básicos, ok.
pero yo quiero aprender en el futuro, pero parece muy difícil.
Estoy de acuerdo. Yo pienso lo mismo. Es un poco difícil para, no sé, acostumbrarme a este ritmo y, sí, al ritmo de cumbia. Porque es bastante diferente que bachata y salsa. Es como completamente diferente.
Sí, los pasos es diferente. Cumbia, los pasos en cumbia es muy similar a los pasos de salsa en Cali, Colombia.
Oh, ¿verdad?
Sí,
Ok.
salsa caleña o
Caleña.
salsa caleño es, ¿cómo se dice? Abrir los cuerpos.
Ok.
Cuando tú abrir las cuerpos en salsa es muy similar. So cumbia es similar a salsa caleña en mi opinión, pero el ritmo es un poco diferente.
Así es. ¿Y has notado una diferencia entre la cumbia que se baile y pone aquí, en Texas, que la cumbia en Colombia?
En Cali, no sé bailar cumbia en Cali, solamente salsa.
Oh, no sabe. Ah, ok.
Sí. Los colombianos bailan bachata, pero en otras partes.
Ok.
No he visto bachata en Cali, pero en otras ciudades, en particular Manizales, en Medellín, he visto a los colombianos bailan, bachata, merengue, pero en Cali solamente salsa.
Ok, interesante, no sabía eso. Pero me toca aprender salsa caleña, porque ya había visto varias veces en YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, en todas las plataformas, y me llama la atención muchísimo como este estilo de salsa. Yo creo que es más rápido y más pasitos y como con las piernas como cruzadas y todo eso me encanta. Es muy distinta o distinto ese estilo. Me gusta.
Sí. ¿Cómo se dice? Like los pasos de shine, like shine
Shine?
moves, like when they're when someone's dancing solo,
Ajá. Yo no sé.
like cuando yo veo los pasos en Colombia de shine, muy es muy bacano, it's very cool. like hay un paso se llama I think it's Susie Q. Like
So this you, okay.
he visto ¿cómo se dice? Diferentes pasos diferentes de Susie Q in Cali.
Oh, wow.
It's crazy, very cool.
Okay. ¿Y cuál es tu género de música favorita o favorito?
¿Música de español o en general?
Sí, de español. Para escuchar, no solamente para bailar.
Oh, okay. Tal vez bachata también. Pero reggaeton es muy bacano también. No sé, porque en mi playlist tengo mucho canciones de salsa, pero cuando yo manejo en mi carro, probablemente reggaeton.
Reggaeton.
Ujú.
Okay. ¿Tienes un cantante favorito de reggaeton?
No tengo un favorito, pero Archangel,
Okay.
let's see, Bad Bunny, claro que sí, Maluma, Ozuna.
Sí, me gusta Ozuna.
So no tengo un favorito, pero a mí me gusta los cuatro.
Ok, excelente. Y yo sé que vives en Texas, claramente, y hablas mucho con los hispanohablantes aquí, como en las discotecas o en las tiendas o por donde sea, porque yo sé que hay un montón de hispanohablantes aquí y siempre están hablando en español por todos lados en San Antonio.
Sí. So hay muchas oportunidades a hablar en español. Sí, estoy de acuerdo. En las tiendas, en Walmart, en los restaurantes. Pero me parece que algunos hispanohablantes no quiero hablar con say non-Spanish speakers.
Ok.
Sometimes me siento pero pero con amigos yo practico un poquito.
Ok, perfecto. ¿Y has conocido latinos de otros países de habla hispana, menos México? Porque yo he conocido gente de Nicaragua, Bolivia, Colombia, RD, aquí en San Antonio. Entonces,
¿En San Antonio?
Ajá, sí. Entonces yo quiero saber si has conocido otras personas también de otros países.
Yo conocí algunas personas de Honduras en San Antonio, algunos colombianos también, pero no he conocido like puertorriqueños o dominicanos, pero en California la mayoría es definitivamente mexicanos. A veces, ¿cómo se dice? El Salvadorians,
Ok.
you know.
Creo que salvadoreños, yo creo. No sé.
No sé. No sé. Un poco, un poco puertorriqueños, boricuas, pero la mayoría es los mexicanos. Son los mexicanos.
Mexicanos, ok. ¿Y prefieres vivir en Texas o en California?
La clima en California es cerca perfecta para mí.
Perfecto.
Perfecto para
Ok.
mí. los precios. So, ahora me prefiere a vivir en Texas.
Entiendo. Sí,
Pero
me imagino que
echo
sí.
de menos, me extraño la clima en California.
Ok. Sí, yo tengo una tía que vive ahí y siempre me está diciendo sobre qué tal es el clima ahí, que es perfecto y no es demasiado eh, o no hace calor tanto ahí. Como es caluroso, pero no tanto. No igual que Texas, la temperatura que tenemos acá. Como aquí es sumamente caluroso.
Sí, sí, también me extraño las playas en Sur California. No he visitado las playas en Texas, pero me he oído que es,
Sí.
it's okay.
Ajá, no es igual. No se comparen.
Sí, no es igual, sí.
Porque ¿dónde creciste? Nos dijiste que estuvo cerca de Los Ángeles, ¿verdad?
Sí, sí.
Ok, entonces estaba cerca del océano también.
Yeah, sí, viví muy cerca de las playas, se llama, ¿cómo se dice? Newport Beach, so la playa de Newport en OC.
Ok.
Probablemente 30 minutos donde viví.
Ok. Ok, entiendo. Sí, nunca había ido a un lago, sí, un lago, ni tampoco una playa en Texas aún. Quizás en el futuro, pero quizás no en San Antonio, pero en Houston quizás yo iría o yo iré a una playa. Pero no sé si los lagos aquí en Texas, o bueno, en San Antonio son buenos para nadar.
So
Yo lo sé.
tú naciste en Houston?
No, yo nací en Minnesota, en Minneapolis.
Okay.
Ajá, me mudé aquí casi hace un año. Me mudé aquí en junio del año pasado.
So, ¿cómo es la clima en Minnesota?
Horrible, muy frío. Por la mayor parte por la mayor parte del año es frío, como entre noviembre hasta marzo. Hasta marzo es muy frío. El clima, sí, hace muy frío ahí. Y también hay mucha nieve. No me gusta conducir ahí. Por eso me mudé a Texas para escapar del frío y otras razones también. Pero eso fue una gran razón para
Okay.
que me mudé aquí. Pero yo diría que los veranos son casi perfectos. El clima. El clima en los veranos es muy chévere. No hace tanto calor. Casi nunca alcanza 90 grados. Casi nunca. Pero sí, sí, casi nunca. Alrededor 80 grados, 85, 86, 7, 8, alrededor de ahí. Pero para los Minnesotans, como más que 90 grados es demasiado. Como hay poca gente que está saliendo. Entonces es como me pone, o me da mucha risa ver la diferencia como en la cultura con el clima. Porque aquí podemos estar afuera por todo el año, pero en Minnesota es un poco peligroso para estar afuera, como caminando durante el invierno, ¿me entiendes? En ese aspecto.
Okay.
Entonces, yo diría, durante el invierno, estás más encerrado. Aunque te guste las actividades afuera, como, no sé, como esquiar no sé cómo dice, snowboarding o pescar sobre hielo, como pescar en un lago que está enfriado.
Enfriado. Like
Eh,
freeze?
sí, ajá. Porque hay gente ahí que pescar durante el invierno, pero obviamente como el agua no fluye, es frío. Sí, bueno, no es frío, pero sí, yo creo que es enfriado, algo así, pero es solamente hielo, ¿me entiendes?
Yo creo.
Ajá, entonces tiene que como cortar un círculo o algo así en el hielo y pescas así.
Ah, okay. So, tú sabes, ¿cómo se dice? ¿Cómo se dice? So, you mentioned, you mentioned snowboarding. So,
Ajá.
tú sabes, snowboarding. ¿Cómo se dice snowboarding?
Ni idea, en español, ni idea.
Ni idea.
Ah,
Okay.
yo digo como, no sé, bajar. No sé, bajar. Pero solamente había ido, es muy raro, pero solamente había hecho una vez en mi vida, una vez. Y eso fue el año pasado.
Okay. So, ¿cuántos años vives en San Antonio?
Menos que un año. Menos que un año.
Okay.
Ajá.
Okay.
Yo yo me mudé aquí el junio del año pasado. So, en 2022, en el junio, me mudé aquí.
Okay.
Poco tiempo.
Un poco tiempo. Yo también. Casi 2 años para mí.
Ok. ¿Dónde vivías antes?
En California. So, después Corea, ¿cómo se dice? Volver. Yeah, yo volveré a California por un año. Entonces Texas en 2021.
Ok. En aparte de eso, solamente vivías en California, aparte de Corea, Colombia y China.
China. So primero Colombia, entonces China por 3 años. Entonces viví en Corea por solamente un año. Entonces yo volver, ¿cómo se dice? ¿Es it volver?
Volví. Ajá. O regresé.
Regresé a California por casi 9 meses. Entonces Texas en 2012 en junio también.
Ok.
En Bernie.
Bernie. ¿Estás cerca de San Antonio?
Sí. Just 30 minutos es norte de San Antonio.
Ok.
La próxima ciudad.
Ok. Ok. Todavía no conozco todos los pueblos y ciudades de Texas. Estoy aprendiendo.
Bernie, a mí me gusta, pero San Antonio tienen la energía.
Energía, ok. Bernie es más chiquito. Yo me imagino.
Sí,
imagino.
los personas en Bernie tienen mucho dinero.
Ok.
Sí, es affluent. Pero viví con mi amigo por, algunos meses. Entonces, yo tengo mi apartamento.
Ok, perfecto. Sí, a mí me gusta San Antonio. Todo lo que hay aquí, como dijiste, la energía de la gente aquí, wow, es muy alta. No, me impresionó muchísimo la gente de aquí, la comunidad. Como ya ves con la comunidad de los bailadores, es muy cerca. Me encanta eso. Sí, me gusta como casi todo de San Antonio.
Sí, sí, sí. ¿Has estado a la discoteca de Azúcar?
No, nunca, nunca, pero me toca ir ahí.
Ah, sí, sí. A mí me gusta la discoteca ahí. Es downtown.
Ok.
Es downtown. Pero me prefiere los sociales. You know, like una más
Ajá, eso sí es.
bachata or esta noche or yeah, una más bachata esta noche y me olvido la otra sociales. Mambo Caribe.
Vamos,
Se
Caribe.
llama Mambo Caribe. Ujú.
Ajá.
A mí me gusta Mambo Caribe también. Um, es mejor que las discotecas.
¿Y por qué crees esto?
Um, las personas en las sociales son muy, ¿cómo se dice? Are muy warm, are more friendly. Los personas en las discotecas, en mi opinión, la mayoría no quiere bailar porque ellos no sé bailar, no sé cómo bailar. Um, pero
Ajá.
en las sociales, las personas es, no, es en mi opinión, como se dice, they don't care, no pasa nada a aprender.
Sí, estoy de acuerdo contigo. Eso es lo que yo he notado también. Sí, a unas discotecas a los que he ido, donde debería bailar, los lugares donde como en el piso, donde se debería bailar, pero están parados y no hacen nada. Entonces, sí, yo entiendo.
Sí.
Un poco raro, pero yo entiendo como la gente, porque como algunos de los lugares que habías mencionado, esos lugares son estudios o donde se dan clases de bailar. Entonces cada quien sabe que, ok, vamos a bailar aquí, vamos a practicar o lo que sea, pero otros lugares como quizás no es lo mismo. No solamente para bailar, pero es para bailar, pero es para practicar. O sí, estar parados y tomar algo.
Ajá, ajá. You know, ¿cómo se dice? Tres chupas de tequila es no problema.
Claro. Ok,
Sí.
perfecto. Muchas gracias por compartiendo un poco de tu historia con tu aprendizaje de idiomas, con tus viajes y de tus trucos para aprender idiomas también.
El gusto es mío, un placer. Muchas gracias, Josh.
De nada. Y gracias a todos ustedes por viendo este video. Y sí, nos vemos luego. Muchas gracias, Brian, y
Right.
hasta luego.
Hasta luego.